Krista Redpath Media presents Montana Made, a featured series of the Krista Redpath podcast. I'm your host, Krista, veteran broadcaster and proud Montanan. Each episode, we'll sit down with athletes, entrepreneurs, community leaders, and hometown heroes for conversations about resilience and the moments that define us, all rooted in the people and experiences that make this state unlike anywhere else. So settle in as we celebrate remarkable journeys and discover what it truly means to be Montana Made. Montana Made is proudly presented by Clearwater Credit Union. One of the reasons Clearwater Credit Union is such a great fit for Montana Made is because they believe strong communities are built by investing in people. Whether it's supporting local nonprofits, providing financial education, helping small businesses grow, or creating opportunities for families across Montana, Clearwater believes banking can make a real difference. That's a mission I'm proud to share. To learn more about Clearwater Credit Union services and community impact, visit clearwatercreditunion.org. Another special thank you to our supporting sponsor, Vertical Raise, your premier online fundraising platform. Welcome to another episode of Montana Made, a special summer series on the Krista Redpath podcast, where we celebrate the remarkable people whose stories begin right here in Big Sky Country. Every Montana story begins with home, and Dave Kempfert, that story starts right here in Missoula. As a Hellgate Knight, Dave grew up surrounded by Grizzly athletics. His father, Al, worked in the University of Montana athletic department, while his older brother, Matt, became one of the top basketball players in school history, playing alongside current head coach Travis DeCure. Long before Dave ever wore a Grizzly uniform, he was painting the bleachers at Dornblazer Field and watching Washington Grizzly Stadium take shape. That boy who dreamed of playing for Montana went on to become one of the finest offensive linemen in program history. An All-American center, Dave helped lead the Grizzlies to their first NCAA Division I national championship in 1995 before earning an opportunity in the NFL. Today, Dave serves as the Director of Rehabilitation Services at the Bone and Joint Institute of Tennessee. He and his wife, Allison, have built a wonderful life together, raising their son Colin, who now plays football at Carson Newman, and their daughter Finley. Dave, it is so great to have you. Welcome to Montana Made.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you having me. This is exciting. It's good. It's good to get a chance to do this.
So, Dave, I absolutely just want to start at the beginning. Tell me about what it was like growing up in Missoula.
As you know, anybody who's been there knows that's a pretty special place. So I think there's so much about Missoula that I still miss, and if I think back to kind of earliest memories, it's just the opportunity to be outdoors, that constantly something going on, and whether it was hikes up the Rattlesnake with my parents and grandparents. I was lucky enough, my grandparents lived right up the hill, so we always had family things going on. It was, going to Flathead Lake, going downtown. My mom was a small business owner, so when we were really young, she owned a business downtown. So she introduced us to the downtown culture, and we would go to Butterfly Herbs and beg her for milkshakes. You might hear food references. I'm an O-line guy. Food was always big with me.
Well, Butterfly Herbs still has great milkshakes.
Yeah,
So, hey,
yeah.
I mean, some things just never go out of style.
So to do those things, and I'd go to the post-op barber shop as a kid, and just everything was an adventure in Missoula as a kid, and there was so many great personalities, and so many, even back then there was just so many different diverse people, and people who had been Montana people their whole lives, and people who had, like my parents weren't from Montana originally, but had found their heaven in Missoula, and just were so excited to share that with us as kids.
Tell me about the sibling rivalry. Was there sibling rivalry?
I think there's always going to be something, right? It wasn't as bad because we played two different sports. It was funny when I was a kid because Matt was so excellent at basketball from a young age. And we're two really different people, as a lot of people know. And but we're very, very driven, and we both love sports and love being able to do it in Missoula. But I would get picked for basketball games, as a kid, and then they would quickly realize, like, oh yeah, none of that basketball skill is in Dave Kempfert. That was all Big Brother. And then I always tease Matt because he went out for football for a couple of years, and I think his nickname was Liquid, because the coach said he flowed away from the play because he wasn't a big
great.
physical kid, like I was when we were younger. And so just two really different athletes, but we always pushed each other. And I think the neat thing about having Matt involved in sports is he's a good person. He always led the way, and told me, hey, these are going to be hard days ahead. These are the
Mhm.
challenges. This is what you should do here. You need to take these things seriously. And so he was always one to push me in all the in a lot of the good ways. And then of course the big brother prodding and things like that. And that's always fun to have somebody who's involved in sports like you are, he'd make sure that I was involved with some of the older kids in school.
Yeah.
I get to hang out with the seniors and stuff like that when I was a sophomore at Hellgate, and so he always kind of involved me in groups and things like that. So it was good. It was it was a fun kind of sibling rivalry to have.
So your dad worked in Grizzly athletics. Like, what did you learn by watching that? You were always involved with the University of Montana.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as young as I can remember, it was always about the Grizz. I was the kid who had Montana Grizz bumper stickers. And some people might remember these things, but it was like run with the or follow the Grizzlies or run with a bear behind, like all these old '80s slogans.
That's so
Things.
Missoula in the 80s.
Yeah,
That's so
and
U of M.
yeah, and so we had all these things, and it was all over everything I owned. And I probably got in trouble at home because I'd have furniture in my bedroom, and there'd be Grizz bumper stickers all over it.
Hmm.
Everything was Grizz, and my dad would take us in at a young age, and we would work. He started off as kind of like the booster club president, so to speak,
Hmm.
and then eventually ended up as the assistant athletic director for corporate sponsorships. But we would go in, and my brother and sister and I would go and help my dad do the mailing list, where we would put people's tickets in envelopes and throw in a bumper sticker and then make sure they were addressed properly. And so it was always just participating and being a Grizz and the effect it had on the community. And so that was always fun to be around. And like you said, we painted the bleachers green when I was a kid. People aren't going to remember a lot of this stuff, but the old Dornblazer Stadium, when they had the tailgates, I used to help my family hang up those multicolored cheap little flag things to just mark off a section. And the local brewer would come in with a couple kegs of beer, and my mom and dad would grill hamburgers, and that was tailgating back in the day. And so it's changed so much. So it's fun to remember those days and look back at old photos of us being little kids and wearing the 1980s shorts that were too short, but they were all Grizz Cub Club shirts,
Yes.
and running around and helping my parents just do anything we could to be a part of the university and cheering on the Grizz.
So before the Grizz, though, there were the Hellgate Knights. And you had the amazing honor of being inducted into the Hall of Fame this past year, which was just incredible. And, there's a lot of players, including my son, that talked about the speech that you gave to the team before the homecoming game. But it all kind of came full circle. So take us through what it was like actually playing at Hellgate, and then we can talk about your induction.
Yeah, those are neat years. Those are such formative years, right? And so, to be honest, I was growing up. I was always a little bit undersized for an offensive lineman. Wasn't a great athlete. It wasn't anybody that was going to just turn heads, for years. And to develop under, Van Troxel was my head coach at the time. He's an old
Mhm.
Grizz quarterback, and Jeff Doan, Jim Kelly. Jim Kelly was a neighbor of mine, and so these Hellgate coaches um, and and uh, and staff were so formative to all of us as kids. And so to have people that believed in you, that told you to hang in there, to push you, see a little bit of talent that you had, but be honest with you and say this is where you're going to need to improve. And so for me, it was always about trying to catch up to the guys that I looked up to, whether it was my big brother, and I played this little game of, if Matt was an all conference as a junior in high school, then I had to be all conference by a junior in high school, even though it was different sports, right? And so it was always kind of pushing yourself to improve and get better. And Hellgate was just a great place to do it. It's a neat environment, from the band that would get involved in the games to the stands and your parents being there. And there's such a great community. My grandparents, like I said, lived in town, so my grandparents got to come to the game. My sister was a non-athlete, but was involved in all our events, just like we were in hers. And so just to have that hometown feel, a very supportive family, and a great Hellgate family to kind of grow and develop your love for football under, was a neat place to be.
So take us through the recruiting process. Did you ever think of anything outside of the University of Montana? Did you look at other small schools? Like, take us through what that looked like for you.
Yeah, I was a complete late bloomer, so I wanted to play football, period, right?
Mhm.
Now, of course, the ultimate dream was the Grizz, and if you would have asked me where you wanted to play at that time, I didn't have a lot of opportunities, right?
Mhm.
And so it was one of those things where I just wanted to be a Grizz. That's all I wanted to be. And if something else came and it didn't happen with the Grizz, I would have taken it, I'm sure.
Mhm.
And so I wasn't a kid who was getting a bunch of letters, and I was getting very, very little talk about me. And granted, I understood it. I think I was 215, 220 pounds at the time I was a senior playing left tackle, right? And so, granted, I wasn't turning heads, and I completely understand why. But I always worked hard. My brother grew into college. He ended up being 6'8", but he still grew into college. He put on a ton of size when he left high
Mhm.
school. And so I was hoping I had that kind of future ahead of me as well. And so when I started getting some interest from smaller colleges, I was just begging the Grizz to come through because that's where my whole life was. That's all I ever wanted to be. When we were little kids in the backyard, we'd have Seattle Seahawk helmets, like those
Mhm.
horrible foam loaded helmets that we used to wear as kids. We'd hit each.
Yes.
That might be the start of where some of us get our early concussion history. But everyone would put on the Seattle Seahawks or the Broncos helmets or whatever it was. But they'd say, "Who do you want to be today?" You'd always name your team as a Grizz, and I was always the Grizz. And other people were big time college teams. We are Michigan, they're the USC's, they're pro teams. And they're like, who do what's the name of your team? I was like, it was the Grizz. There was no doubt that that's all I ever want to be. And so when I went to a camp, Hellgate took us to an Idaho camp that was a full
Okay.
contact football camp and had a good camp there. And then really didn't hear anything. And then went to a Grizz camp later. And the Grizz was kind of a partial contact camp. But I guess performed well enough there that it was just enough that Don Reed and some of the coaches said, we're going to take a gamble on this kid. So it was dream come true. It was a very, very, probably the smallest scholarship you could give somebody coming out and still call it a scholarship. But they told me they believed in me. I believed in me. My family did. And so I knew that was the place I was going to go. And even though I potentially could have had maybe a little more money or something at a smaller school, there was no question in my mind that it was going to be worth it to be a Grizz. And so I gladly said yes. Yeah,
Well, that gamble really paid off.
it did. Very lucky.
However,
Yep.
what was the biggest adjustment, Dave? So you make the jump into, playing for the Grizz. Like, what was that
Mhm.
adjustment like going from high school to Division I football?
I remember they brought me in to just watch their offensive line getting together that summer, and used to be able to do things like that.
Yeah.
And they pulled me into like an O-line drill just for a second. They said, "Hey, come up here. This is Dave. He's going to be here next year." And I mean, here I might have been 240 at that time. So here I am with some of the biggest humans I'd ever been around in my life. And I remember getting into my stance and literally my foot almost shaking. I was so nervous about performing already, right? And doing a good job in
Hmm.
front of what was going to be my peers. And and I remember leaving there that day and being like, how am I ever going to get that kind of size? How am I ever going to get that kind of footwork? They're all just so impressive to you as a kid.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of my first wake up call of like, wow, I better hit it really hard this summer and come in, prepared to go mentally, physically, and get myself to a place where I hadn't thought of myself at that level. Um,
Hmm.
probably as much as I needed to. And so I had to overcome some mental obstacles that first year. And it was nice because, again, my brother kind of guided me through because he had the same issues, right? When you go to college, it's a big world. All of a sudden, you're kind of going from being a pretty good high school player, a good high school player, to you're the bottom of the rung again. And how fast can you get caught up? And you learn all the important things, right? Like you learn how to be a better teammate. You
Hmm.
learn how to have higher expectations for yourself. You learn that how much detail matters, right, in your preparation and in your technique. And so all those things, I think that first year um, developing as a Grizz were a really, really big challenge for me. And when that started to come along and I started to see myself in a different light, then I think that's when I started to realize I could maybe be something more than just be there and actually be a contributor and try to become somebody who made our team better and not just made it as a player, right?
So I love this story of like an underdog or someone that comes in that maybe isn't at the weight that the rest of
Mhm.
their peers are at. But I feel like, Dave, did that make you focus more on technique? Because it's like you obviously don't have the size yet. So
Yeah.
they move you to center. But I mean, I feel like that technique was a huge part of it and like laying that foundation.
Yeah, everything from learning to snap a ball for the first time. I'd never played center in my life, so I
Mhm.
would stay after practice, and Coach Denny, he would have me. Some poor other guy would get pulled out. He wanted to go shower, and he'd be, "Hey, catch balls from Kempfert snap," and I had to do 20 perfect ones before I could go in and shower, right? And so all those little details matter, and I think that that being that undersized, I still will say to this day that being undersized was the best thing that happened to me because I had the desire. I wanted to be a Grizz so bad. I had to get better at technique than other guys because I didn't have the strength. I didn't have the weight to
Mhm.
throw around. And then later on, when that started to come and I had good technique or improving technique anyway, and then the size and the strength started to come, then I started to realize like, wow, that was the easiest that's ever been. right? And then I could really start focusing on taking that next level of becoming an aggressive player who was more confident in themselves, and making a difference. So
We talk so much about our peers, and Dave, like looking back at the years I played, which were the same years as yours. I mean, our careers
yeah,
overlapped. At the time, like we didn't realize, but everyone around us was winning. Every
yeah,
program was winning. We were just surrounded by winners and
yeah,
people that set the bar very high. Obviously, the Grizz football team had not won a national championship yet. You achieved that in your career. But
yeah.
talk about your teammates around you and setting those routines and expectations with the people that go on to become your best friends.
Yeah. I actually got a photo in my office, right? It's here. I look at it every single day, and it's our team that it's going into our senior year. So it's we're all juniors. We just won the
Mhm.
national championship. And I look back at that picture, and sometimes I just laugh, and I think about it now when you bring this up. But I mean, we were 18-year-old punks sitting around in dorm rooms, and we were talking about how I'm going to be better than this guy ahead of me. And these were good players. These were exceptional
Mhm.
players, obviously, and people that we looked up to. And we were like, I'll be better than him. And we had no right to say that. We were just a bunch of punks just trying to figure it out, right? But we believed
Mhm.
it, right? And we believed in each
Mhm.
other. And so we had this group, this core group of guys that pushed each other. And if somebody didn't, step their game up, we were going to talk about it, right? We held each other to a different standard, and but it was done in a good way. It was done in a brotherhood way, which was pretty neat. But yeah, you're right. We're surrounded by winning all across the board. I mean, from men's and women's basketball, and football and all that. I think one year, gosh, I think was it my junior year where we all won the Big Sky Conference at the same time, and it just happened over and over again. And so it was just a neat time. You had high expectations. You saw other
Mhm.
people around you being successful. We would go to the volleyball games and the Lady Grizz basketball games,
Yeah.
and people would cheer us on at football. And my brother, was great. Multiple years our careers overlapped, and he would go watch me when our football games. Luckily, we were winning enough that we were going further into the year, and
Mhm.
so basketball and football would be going at the same time. So he'd come to my football games in the morning. I go watch his basketball games at night, and then a group of us would hang out in the evening. And so it just became this big expectation of where everyone was tight, everyone was pushing themselves to win, and there was no doubt that we weren't going to be champions in our minds.
So talk about the leadership. You mentioned Mick Dennehy, but also Don Reed.
Yeah,
Just an effective leader, but talk about that type of leadership style.
it's amazing. I mean, just some of the best humans. I still stay in touch with Mick Dennehy, and we all miss Don Reed, of course. And it was just one of those things. They could be hard on you, but it was the true family of football. And some people, they hold different expectations of what family, is supposed to mean. And family meant that they were going to love you, they were going to believe in you, but they're also going to hold you accountable, right? And so to have someone who you trusted like that because you knew they cared, and you could fail, and they would say, all right, Annie, up, go again. You're gonna get this down. We believe in you. We brought you here for a reason. I remember one year, we had like our in the underground lecture hall. We'd always have our big football meeting at the start of the year.
Uri Lecture Hall,
Yuri
right?
lecture hall. That's the name. Yeah. And
Yes.
uh, and usually, some guys, we'd all cut our hair weird, and we do funny things to kind of start the year off in a humorous way. And but I remember one year I stood up, and Don Reed came over and said, "You know who the best center in the Big Sky Conference is?" And I named the guy from Boise State who just won, first team all conference last year. And he goes, "You're wrong. It's you. And if you don't start believing it, then why is anybody else going to believe it?" And I remember thinking, like, I was not there yet. I was not a first team all conference guy in my mind. Wasn't thinking that way. I was just trying to progress as a player. And to have him look me in the face and say that, and I was like, why am I not thinking of myself that way, right? And so just giving a guy who was still coming up, trying to still gain size, still gain weight, become a good player, to have him and McDenny believe in this skinny, undersized Hellgate kid, and always bring me along, always hold me accountable. They weren't afraid to yell and scream appropriately, right? And get the most out of you. But they also were the first ones to compliment you and be honest with you about when you did things well. And then you're surrounded by all these great guys that are going through the same experience you are. And Montana was just a neat place. It was just a bunch of um, local guys who wanted to perform well for each other. They loved their coaches. They wanted to do well for their coach. We would lay down in traffic for those guys. And then luckily enough, when you're playing at home, you're playing for your grandparents and your friends and your girlfriends and all those things, right? And
Hmm.
so it just brings something out in you that I think a lot of places don't get, and we were lucky enough to have that back in the day.
I think it's such a like cliche question to be like, when did you know that your team was going to be special and you were going to go on and win the national championship? Because I feel like the
Mhm.
standard was set. We all thought we should be winning. We
Right.
really had championship mentality, but I feel like that group, that national championship group was especially dialed in, and that locker room was just so close.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a special time. And I don't know if there was one moment, where I can say like either personally or as a team, I saw say, oh, that's the moment we changed. That's the moment we got serious. That's the moment we really believed. I
Hmm.
think it was just this constant growth of taking things from the guys that came before us, right? The standards that they had set. I mean, you had, and I miss, Hackney already, but the equipment manager, he had standards for you. But everybody in that building had standards. And so you saw it every single day. And sometimes it was in the way of your coaching and specific football things, but other things it was like, were you in class? Were you doing that correctly? Are you talking respectfully to the people who are handing you your laundry bag, right? And so there's always this standard that kind of built. And so I think it was this, for me anyway, it was this gradual expectation of, let's take the next step now. And whether that was going to be at a practice, whether that was going to be looking the entirety of a season, whether that was going to look at what we did in springtime. But there was always this thing of like, okay, what's the next step? We've achieved this. Now what's the next step? And so, to come in and have our streak, I think when I got there, we already had a streak of 7 over the Cats. And we sat around, we looked each other in the eyes and said, they're never going to beat us, period. We're not going to let that happen. And Gokachia always said it back in the day, he's like, not on our watch. And that just kind of became our standard of like, this isn't happening on our watch. And I think the tough part and the part that shook me was when we played Youngstown State when I was a junior,
Hmm.
excuse me, as a sophomore. And we went to Youngstown State and we're in the semifinal game. We're one game away from the national championship and we lost. And I remember just going back in the locker room and just being devastated, just disappointed. You disappointed yourself. You disappointed your fans. You got that close to something we'd never done. And you start thinking about to the previous Grizz team that went to the semifinal game. And I think they lost to Georgia Southern, if I remember right, and how close those guys got. And those were your idols and they didn't get there. Are you ever going to get there? Was this our chance? And I remember just being there, just physically sick after the game, and stayed there for a while. And then as the days and weeks went by, you started to remember what you had, what got you there, and that you were
Hmm.
always still on this climb, like that escalation that I was just talking about. And so I think that when we all came back and realized, like, yeah, that was a setback, but that's not a definition of who we are. This is when we're going to do it. And then you have, you throw a Dave Dickinson maturing into the mix. Now we've got an offensive line that it started to gel more, and we had more guys that had played together and just started to understand how the other ones did things and who needed help with certain types of players. And then our defense just started to dominate as well. And so I think that was a setback mentally for me, but quickly recovered to realize like we're just getting better and better, and our mindset's not going to change because we got that close, and there's no reason we can't do this. And so that was that was neat to bounce back that next year and realize when we showed up at camp, we had higher expectations than we ever had.
So December 16th, 1995,
Mhm.
you travel to West Virginia. Basically, you're playing Marshall on their own home field, which, have some issues with that, but it all turned
Correct.
out really well. But like, take us back to that championship moment. It's such a pivotal, huge moment for the
Mhm.
University of Montana in Grizzly football, setting the precedent. But I want to talk about like what was the atmosphere like in that stadium?
Yeah, I mean, anything like that's electric, right? You have all these days that build up to it, weeks that build up to it, and I mean, you never study film as hard as you study film going into that game, I'll tell you. And you do everything right in the treatment room. So some things you got some aches and bruises, and I've played with those before, and you don't think about hitting the
Mhm.
treatment room, but you're going to make sure that you're 100% because this is something that people dream about, right? To get an
Oh,
opportunity, you certainly don't want to take the L on that one, and uh, and so I think just the focus that happens that week, and you just do everything a little bit even more intense, more perfect, more detailed than you've ever done it before. And then there's the travel. And so you're trying to stay focused, but you're traveling a long way. You're
hmm.
reading articles that you probably should have just stayed away from and not read, and start to, think about it too much early on. But you get there and gosh, their fans are nice and their administration's nice. And you go to these dinners and they have all these fun things set up with you, but inside I mean, for me, and I know I probably speak for a lot of guys, you got this, I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm ornery. I'm upset. I want to get to
Right.
the game. I want to play this sucker. I want to win this thing and bring it back to Missoula, which is, to everybody that has supported you along the way and has never got to see their team even go this far. So there's all these pressures. And then you're going to a dinner and you're trying to act nice. And, we had a night where they want us to sing karaoke and we're like, guys, this was a really bad idea. Right. And I know they were trying to do something nice for us, but I tell you what, and some people know this story, some people don't, but Marshall players got up and they started singing. They basically started singing, I think, some John Denver and some songs that were country. And it was almost like we took it, we were probably a little oversensitive at that time, but we took it as a little bit of a goad towards us and a little bit of a dig. And they started talking about how, what their expectations were. And we were playing in their house. And a lot of us just picked up our chairs and we moved once it got a little bit out of hand on their end, we just moved our chairs to the exit. And the coaches are like, what are you guys doing? And we're like, we're ready to go. Like, we're ready to go. We're ready to play these guys now. And so they're like, hey, we got some more things going on. And we're like, nope, I think we're done for the night. I think we're ready to go.
So this was a banquet? This was like a banquet that they
had?
had?
After banquet type thing where they put karaoke and we just kind of felt like their team, not their administration or anybody, but their team was starting to disrespect us and not, they weren't looking at us like we looked at us and what we knew we could do on the field. And so a lot of us pulled our chairs up and sat at the door and we were ready to go. And one of the coaches came up and said, boy, if you guys didn't have ammo before, you got it now. And it just got real silent. I think everybody just honed in and focused. And I think at that point, that's when I knew like we were going to come after these guys like we never come after anybody before.
So we all remember and obviously know Dave Dickinson, just a fantastic Grizz. And also we'll never forget Andy Larson's amazing kick. But was there a moment in the game, Dave, that you remember that like most people didn't see?
I don't know if there was a moment. I mean, honestly, at that time in that kind of a game, we did not play great as an offensive line in that game, to be honest, when we won it. And so everything was just so focused in the next play, putting the things behind you. And so I was so hyper focused on the next play, what I was doing, what we could do as a team, communicating with the coaches. I'm sure there's lots of things that went on in that game defensively that I didn't even catch. Right. Because other times we got used to winning. We were winning big going into that game. I mean, we were just destroying teams and stuff that didn't even make sense. I mean, we played very good teams with very good athletes, but we were just on a roll and we had this belief system that was just taking us to this heights we never thought we'd see. And so I think that to not be just knocking the snot out of somebody for the first time, I think I probably missed a lot of that game, to be honest, because I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't watching our defense. I was on the bench talking to coaches, talking to players, thinking through my what was happening to me, where I could do better. I think there was no panic during that game that I remember. I mean, a lot of times in those games, you get so nervous, you panic, you think the score's winding down. Are we going to get this sucker? And I don't remember ever feeling panicked. I just remember feeling very hyper focused in the moment. And but I tell you what, like the weight that comes off when you watch that kick go through, right? And Mike Earhart's catch before that, right? Yeah. And just to be like, oh my gosh, like we're there, like, and then I think for the first time, like it just gets me choked up thinking about it. But for the first time, you saw that glimpse of like, I didn't ever think we were going to lose, but I didn't know we were going to win, right? It was just like, what's the next play? What's the next series? What's the next battle going to be? And then all of a sudden, you saw that glimpse of like, we're going to do this, right? And it just happened so late in the game for me, and we weren't used to that. Like I said, we're used to beating people pretty handily, and we went down to some tight games. I'm not saying that, but you always had that confidence. And that game, personally, I don't know if it wasn't a lack of confidence, but I just didn't have that same feeling until right to the end. And then it's like, as soon as that happened, the stadium opened up. I heard more. I looked around and actually saw people in the stands for the first time. And I paid more attention to our crowd and things that were going on. And part of me, honestly, after the game, I was like, damn, I wish I would have looked around more, because there was such a huge group of Montana people. And we all know, I mean, there's cost to that trip. There's time. It's right after Christmas. And to have people have traveled to support us like they did was just unbelievable. And I remember thinking like, man, I should have been looking around a little bit more and enjoying this a little bit more, but that's okay. We won and we had plenty of time to enjoy that later.
So obviously I watched it from back in Missoula. And so I can't wait to talk about what it was like to greet the plane, because it was absolutely insane. But what was it like on the field? Like, what was the celebration like?
Oh my gosh. It's just, at first it's like, you don't know to drop to your knees and just cry about it or scream at the top of your lungs and just go running like, you look like Leatherface in the end of, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just go
Yeah.
losing your mind. I mean, you have all these emotions that are hitting you at that time. And I think that, for me, it was just immediately, I thought of, we were so happy to get this for Coach Reed. And I was so happy to get this for our coaches, and particularly my position coach, Mick Dennehy. So wanted to find those guys right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, everybody's mobbing them. Everybody's going after the coaches. The coaches are hugging. They're not thinking about, they probably don't want to touch the big sweaty old lineman and give him a hug after the game. But to do that, and then immediately to just look around and see I kind of just sat there and just watched the chaos kind of go and everybody run. And I didn't just jump in the group that ran to midfield and all that. But just to look at your teammates' faces and just think, man, we did this. And then to have that moment where you look back and say, we were talking about this at 18 years old and we had no right to be talking about it. We weren't that good yet, right? And so to have that moment was a pretty cool moment. And then, of course, then you jump into the celebration. People are celebrating. Then you see people getting interviewed. Your family starts coming down to the field, and your friends, and people are hugging on you, and you're like, I don't even know who that guy is, but
I'm going to give him a hug.
Yeah, but I'll give that guy a kiss on the forehead right now. You're just so happy, and you're so,
right.
And then you leave that moment, and then you start thinking about everybody back home who isn't here, and who do I get to talk to tonight? Who can I call? Call my grandparents, talk to my friends, but and so you just want to share that with everybody who supported you along the way, whether it was, when I was a McDonald's burger, and I remember literally thinking that in the locker room after the game of like Bob Hermes was my coach. And I remember thinking of Bob Hermes, who was my McDonald's coach back in the day. And I thought of Van Troxel, Jeff Doan, all these guys through high school. And I remember just thinking what it takes to get to that level, and the luck that it takes. It's not just good players. It's not just good coaching. It's like, you've got to have the right mix. You've got to have the right, guys that have the right mentality. You've got to have luck with injuries. You've got to, a Dave Dickinson helps, right? A little bit, so all those different things that it takes to do that. And so just to sit back and think about all that stuff on the plane was pretty amazing. And I remember, some of us just walked the field, and Jerome Sowers was just screaming at us, like, get in the locker room. Like, we have things to do. We got a plane to catch eventually. And I didn't want to leave. And Blaine McElmurray and Sean Gokachi and we just walked that field. I think Mark Hampy joined us too. And we just walked that field for a while. And they're just like, get up. We're like, one more lap. We're not ready to go yet. And they're like, you guys get your butt in the locker room. But we didn't want to leave. It wasn't a we're walking their field, we beat them on their field. It was just the feeling of the moment. And you're like, when you get that, you don't ever want that to leave.
You don't want it to end.
But you never want it to end, whether it's just standing there in an empty stadium and everybody's gone. You didn't want that feeling to end, because you knew like what it took to get there. And that's, I was a junior at the time, and I wasn't thinking about next year at that time, but you knew that was such a special thing that most people never get an opportunity to achieve. So pretty neat times.
So what was it? You get on the plane, you finally leave the field, Dave, and you get on the plane. And did you even know what was waiting for you back in Missoula? Because to me, it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life at the U, was waiting for you guys to get there. And being at the airport. I was at the airport, and I'm like, this is
thank you for coming, because that was phenomenal.
It was just packed. I mean, it was insane looking at everyone greeting you guys. Yeah. So when did it switch to okay, we're almost home, and oh my goodness, we have half of Missoula that is waiting for us?
Yeah, I had no clue, to be honest. I'm sure some guys did, or somebody in the know, and I should have probably known better. I was probably still just so wrapped up in the moment, and nothing had really sunk in yet about what it all means, but you're thinking it through, and you pull in, and the plane lands, and they say, hey, we got someplace, we got a detour real quick, and you get on the bus, and then you go there, and here, it looked like the entirety of Missoula was there from my perspective. They're playing, Queens, We Are the Champions, and people have already, it's late, right? We got back real late, and people have already made signs.
Yes,
and they're,
I know. We made a sign. We made a sign. Yes, nice. The Lady Grizz were like, we were just like, this is incredible.
Yeah, and to come back to that, and like I said, when you grow up in Montana and you grow up in Missoula, and you're playing with the majority of Montana kids, right? Yeah. And the guys that didn't come from Montana quickly adapted to this. This is why Montana, not only the University of Montana as a school, but the football program in the town is such a special place. And so all these guys that had truly bought into what it means to be a Grizz, that I had luckily got glimpses of since I was 3 years old. and to be there with those guys and to see the town come out like that, it's just something you'll never ever forget, and something that is really unachievable in any other kind of aspect of life down the road, unless you're a rock star, because that's what it made you feel like,
Yeah.
but it wasn't fans, it was friends, it was family.
Yeah.
Like everybody, your fans felt like that to you. Your fans felt like friends, and they just supported us so well. And you say that, and every school says that, and I'm sure guys are going to say it at other schools. But I think those of us that were there, we know what Missoula was at that time. We know what it meant to be a Grizz at that time. We know what the state was like at that time. And I would venture a guess to say that Montana still is that place. I know it is, but people think they have the support and things like that, but Montana's different. It just is.
Well, you made history, and I mean, it's been phenomenal to see the dialogue that still surrounds that special moment, that 1995 team. Did you watch the game again? Did you watch it back? Have you watched it since?
I didn't watch it for years. I didn't want to. Number one, we didn't play great on the offensive line, and so it was one of those things, like, you had a championship. And I'm like, I would rather stare at that ring than go back and remind myself of things that we could have done better, right?
Of the grind,
And
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I didn't watch it for years. I did go back later, and just like anything, you watch film, and you
Hmm.
didn't do as bad as you thought. You didn't do as
Right.
good as you thought. But I did watch it, and just the moments of watching your buddies, succeed on the field with you, and then all the hype. But to watch a broadcast of it, because in your mind you have this, what the game was, and then watch a broadcast of something that was that big was really fun to watch later. Um, I think when it comes to other memories of the game, I think I didn't watch it for a long time because I didn't want anything to taint it, and
Yeah.
because you have the memory of the game as a player, and I didn't want to have the memory of that game as a fan.
Right.
Like, I wanted to
You
maintain that.
lived it.
Yeah, you lived it, and that was enough. It's like you go whitewater rafting, and you know what that feels like, and you watch a film of it, and you're like, that was a big wake, but that wasn't as big as I remember it in my mind. And so I think that's why I didn't want to watch the game for so many years, is I didn't want that feeling to change, because that's the only feeling I had of the game was as a player, and going through all that. So
Well, 30 years later, I mean, just 30 years ago, we celebrated in 2025. And I say we because I feel like all of Missoula celebrated. But isn't it interesting how, with teammates, Dave, you can pick right up where you left off? It doesn't even
yeah,
matter if you've had 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. There are moments that you created with just those friends and those teammates. It's like a brotherhood. I think the
yeah,
same way for the Lady Grizz. It's a sisterhood. And I wouldn't say that we were always the closest to friends. Like, you had
mhm.
your own friend groups, right, within the
Sure,
team. But I'm
sure.
telling you, I could talk about every single one of my teammates and what they contributed, even with all of our differences. You found a way to unite. So talk about what it's been like to continue to revisit that. And I know that you're tight with your teammates and your friends, but I know you still keep up with a lot of them.
It's funny, as the years go on, it changes a little bit, right? Like your conversations, so when you know, you're 18 years old and you're just kids, and you didn't look at yourself as kids at the time, right? You kind of, but you watch yourself go through the loss of girlfriends, and tough times on the field, and trying to pick your majors and where you're going to be and what are you going to do when you get done with football and all those things. And so you watch those years go by, and then pretty soon now people are getting married, and they're picking their careers, and some guys are staying in town and other guys are gone. You're like, I never thought that guy would leave, and I never thought this guy would stay. And you know what they wanted to do when they were younger, and some guys completely changed their trajectory. And so it's really, really fun to watch each other get into the fields, that they did. And then as you continue to get older, it's like, where are they ending up, where are they doing? And we still get together, and you talk a little bit more about getting together to go do stuff, and then pretty soon all your lives get busy. So now maybe you are married, maybe you do have kids, maybe you do have a job that's tying you down a little bit more, maybe you did move out of state. And so it becomes a lot more texting, and those types of things. And honestly, years of maybe not talking to some of them at all.
Right.
And then you try to get back home when you can. And boy, then you everybody gets on social media and says, well, who's coming back for what game? And can we all get together? And,
Yeah.
and, and then now it's honestly as fun as it's ever been for me, because a lot of guys that I know have kids that are playing, that have become Grizz, or, that are playing sports and playing football. And some of them have, daughters, and they're not playing football, they're doing other things. And some of them aren't involved in sports at all. But to see, some of these guys, you're like, boy, I never saw that knucklehead, being, doing what he's doing now. And maybe some guy said that about me, but it's really, really fun to watch that entirety of that group go on to be successful. And, I actually told this to a guy the other day, because in my office, I got a picture that I was talking about of that team that won the national championship before we went into our senior year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking up there, and the guy's like, is this your old team? I said, yeah. And I was thinking, like, every single one of those guys went on to be a success. And I'm not talking monetarily, some, yeah, but they're good people. They're good husbands. They're great fathers.
Mm-hmm.
They're leaders in their business. And they're community guys. They're people who, donate time, donate money, contribute in so many ways. And it's just the same group that you kind of always knew it was. And it's a really a fun time to see, to be in your 50s now. Most of us are all in our 50s, and to look back and see kind of how far we've come. But then you still see the same, I look at these guys, I still see our faces at 18, 19, 20, and remember what it was like to be in the dorms and that stuff. So it's really kind of it's interesting to see how those relationships grow, and where we've kind of all ended up now. And that, most of these guys, you're going to, if somebody needed somebody, you would be across the country to help them out if they needed it. Right. It's those kind of bonds. Yeah.
Lifelong bonds.
Yeah. And there are things that you can't sever those kind of ties.
Mm-hmm.
And the cool thing is that, yeah, we won a national championship, but I think we built those ties. I think that led to a national championship. We don't have those bonds because we won. We have those bonds because of the expectations that were set for us by our coaching staff, what the teams did before us.
Right.
And it was the expectations of who you were supposed to be as a U of M graduate, and part of something as unique as those who are lucky enough to wear the Grizz colors.
And I think one other point too, Dave, is you left it better than when you came in, and it continued to stay successful because the kids that came in after you won a national championship after you. So you have to know that you built something that continued to sustain that level of success. And it was a true dynasty period for Grizzly football.
Yeah, it really was. It's been so neat to follow. I mean, like I said, I when I was a kid, it was Dorn Blazer Stadium and wooden seats, and you're painting, and the tailgates I talked about. And now to look at it, and you have to kind of remind yourself of where you started and what built that. And it's always, I mean, I don't care if it's in your career or whatever, it's always about building a bridge for those who come after you. As a parent, it's the same, I look at it the same way. And so I don't know if we thought about that at that age, right? But I think that we built that, whether it was intentional or not, by how we conducted ourselves, how we treated the guys that came in. I remember there was a guy, I won't say who, but there was a guy who went on to play in the NFL, and he played for a large college. And he said, you guys are weird. And he was talking to a bunch of guys, and some guys played college ball other places. A lot of us played for the Grizz. You guys are weird. He goes, you sing to your fans. You like everybody. You go out, you bring the redshirt freshman in. You're trying to teach your redshirt freshman things. He goes, if you don't start for us, we don't talk to you. And I looked at him, I said, well, maybe that's the difference between a national championship team and a 6-5 team, because that's what they were. And I got a nasty look back, but it's the truth. Like, yeah. Did we have fights on the team? Did we scrap a little bit? Did you like everybody all the time? No, right? But that expectation of you were a Grizz, and you were going to respect the fact that they were a Grizz, and you were going to try to make the guy behind you better, because if you went down, you wanted them to be there for you. When you left, you certainly didn't want to see a drop off in the production on the field, or who we were as character guys or team guys, and so nothing makes you happier than seeing teams do well. They came after you, and guys did it for us. I mean, when I was a redshirt freshman, even when I was a senior and had committed, I remember guys like running into guys like Nels Clute, and he's like, come here, and he'd grab me, and here Nels just dwarfed me at the time. He grabbed me. I didn't know who Nels, I mean, I knew him as a player. I loved watching the guy, but he grabbed me and kind of put me under his arm and was telling me, hey, this is what you got to do your freshman year, and you should wear cutoff flannels. And you got to make sure that,
that's great.
You never miss a Grizzly social and all these things. Right. And I was like, man, I was just an 18-year-old kid. He had no reason to do that. I wasn't anybody that anybody really knew or potentially saw what my future was going to be. But those guys still did things like that. And I want to make sure I did that as I became a player as well.
I love that you brought up that you sang to the fans and that the Missoula community was so involved, because I honestly feel, Dave, that the community of Missoula and the University of Montana are so intertwined, and it has always been that way. And even as a Lady Grizz, I'm in line at Dairy Queen, and I'm still getting like, hey, you going to suit up? But I mean, people just love you forever. But I really feel like they felt like they were a part of it. So even with this
Yeah.
football run, it wasn't just that you were a fan. You felt like you were
Yeah.
a part of this team and you were a part of this run.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. Like I said earlier, when you looked at the stands, you didn't see fans, you saw community,
Yes.
right? And they, like I said, it was such a neat thing to see because you felt like that about teams that came before you, but to be
Mhm.
a player and see that and feel that and realize and the home field advantages that we had because of our fans. But that's always big. The noise is always a big factor. But I think more than that, it was like people believed in you,
Mhm.
right?
They
And you
did.
felt that everywhere you went, and you would go into stores, hey, you're one of our boys. Like, hey, good luck this weekend, right?
Right.
And you always felt like that. And you wanted to perform well, not just for your coaches or yourself or your family. You wanted to perform well for the town.
Right. You
You
didn't want
know?
to let them
And
down. You didn't want to
no,
let them
yeah,
down.
absolutely not. No, you couldn't let them down. It wasn't an option, right?
Montana Made is proudly supported by Vertical Raise, your premier online fundraising platform. After spending 4 years helping lead fundraising for Hellgate football, I know firsthand how much time and effort it takes to create opportunities for student athletes. Vertical Raise is helping schools, coaches, and organizations raise more while making fundraising simpler for everyone involved. I'm also proud to partner with Basil and Main Street Pilates as my Krista Redpath media brand partners. Basil has been one of my favorite restaurants in Missoula for years, long before we became partners. And Main Street Pilates has become an important part of my own health and wellness journey, helping me stay strong through the demands of broadcasting and owning my own business. Thank you to Vertical Raise, Basil, and Main Street Pilates for believing in Montana Made. Okay, so the national championship, it cemented you in the Grizzly history books forever as a team, but also you individually, all American. You fulfill your dream of a national championship, but it also opened another door for you that very few athletes get to walk through, which is the NFL. What did making the NFL or taking that next step, when did that really become reality of, okay, I'm gonna go further?
My story is pretty similar through all the stages of my life. So just like in high school, didn't have a lot of interest, was
Mhm.
always supposed to be somebody else. And whether that was true or whether I just thought that, I was so hyper focused on just trying to become the best player I could. And
Mhm.
so when my junior year, things obviously went well, had a good season, had a solid season. Went into my senior year, Mick Denny, he pulled me aside and he told me, he goes, listen, he goes, I'm afraid to get on you in meetings if you make mistakes. And I'm going somewhere with this. But he goes, I'm afraid to get on you in meetings if you make mistakes. He goes, because you're so hard on yourself that I know you know what you need to do and
Mhm.
you coach yourself, you correct yourself. And he kind of said things along those lines. And he goes, do me a favor this year. He goes, have more fun. He goes, when you score, he goes, don't just get back to the bench and figure out what we can do better. He goes, look around. He goes,
Right.
there's lots of things going on. And it was neat because I had just kind of figured that out, like I said, about the national championship game, how I wish I'd have done that. McDenny comes up and says that to me. So my senior year, I think that I started to finally enjoy the game more. When I was
Mhm.
enjoying the game more, I realized it didn't make me less tough. It
Yeah.
didn't make me less prepared. It didn't make me, I
Yeah.
could enjoy it and actually enhanced my game
Mhm.
to enjoy the arena, so to speak, right? And so I think that year when it started to get better, I was playing better, and I started to hear a little bit of interest, like there may be some interest in you, um, and there's a potential for you to be drafted. There's more than likely be a free agent. But I went to a practice and there was a scout from the Buffalo Bills, and I'd seen scouts come through in the years prior. And I said, "Who's the Bills guy here for?" And then he looks at me, he goes, "He's here for you." And I went on to have probably one of the worst practices I'd had that year, right? Because again, in typical Dave Kempfert fashion, I overthought it. But
Sure.
but it was funny because then I went home and I said, like, this actually could happen. And then I
Yes.
immediately put all that to bed and said, you got a season to finish. We're going
Mhm.
for another national championship. We're looking like we're going to head into Marshall, right? At that time.
Mhm.
So I really just focused on that season. And then at the end of the season, got an invite to the Hula Bowl.
Mhm.
And so got a chance to go participate in the Hula Bowl. And so I think at that point, that's when I really started to realize, like, man, if I play well at this thing against different competition outside of the Big Sky Conference, and outside of one AA ball, and
Mhm.
play against some of these guys and do well in the Hula Bowl, maybe I do got a shot at this thing, right? And so that's probably the moment I really first started to think this could happen and get a chance to play pro ball.
Okay, so free agency. The draft comes, you don't get drafted, but you go
Right.
the free agency route. You make your way to Seattle. Howard Mudd
Yeah,
is considered one of the greatest offensive line coaches in the history of the game, and you're
absolutely.
now working with him. So
Yep.
take me through like what was entering the NFL like? Like take us through that and that transition and how you made your way to Seattle.
It's funny. When I was a kid, I wrote a story about wanting to play pro football, even though I never really believed it, probably that age. And it was playing for the Seattle Seahawks. And my mom reminded me of that
Oh
on
my
my 40th
goodness.
birthday. Like, did you remember this story? And I'd completely forgotten about it. So it's kind of ironic I ended up there. But just going there and realizing that you had an opportunity that most people don't have.
Right.
You were never supposed to be the guy anyway. I wasn't supposed to be the guy who was, a Hall of Famer in high school. I wasn't supposed to be the guy that was All American. I never knew I was going to get to play for the Grizz. I never knew I get to, so at that point, I really just said like, well, you have absolutely nothing to lose. You've taken this
Mhm.
as further than you thought, further than probably anybody ever thought. Um, and so I just wanted to stay focused and try and make it a career if I could. Howard Mudd, like you said, is one of the greatest offensive line coaches. I learned more. I mean, you talk about baptism by fire with a guy like that, and I had great O-line coaches in my
Mhm.
career before that. But to listen to Howard Mudd talk, to do it in that setting, one of the first meetings I ever went to, you always hear about hazing in the NFL and all this stuff. So Kevin Mawai is a Hall of Fame center for the Seahawks, played for the Jets, and we go in. There's a big meeting room, and I go and sit down in what looks like kind of like fourth, fifth row up, kind of in the middle. I wanted to be in the front, didn't want to take the front seat. But I was like, I'm going to get there early, right? I'm the guy. I was an undrafted guy. I'm going to do everything I can to make a mark in every way
Right.
possible. So I sit down and there's nobody else there, right? Kevin Mawai walks up to me and he goes, "Hey, you're in my seat, rookie." And I'm like, "Man, they're starting this hazing already, right?" And so I look, I didn't know Kevin. I hadn't met him yet. And I look up and say, "Right." And I kind of stared him down. And he goes, "No, you're in my seat." And I said,
You
"Okay."
really
And
are.
I sat there. And some guy behind me goes, "We have assigned seating, Kempfert. That's Mawai's seat." So my dumb ass sat down
Oh my goodness, that is the best story.
in the starting center seat and was giving him attitude about it. And I stood up and said, "Sorry about that, Kevin." Kind of chucked him on the shoulder, and he just kind of laughed. He goes, "No, I kind of liked it." And I said, "Where should I sit?" I kind of got out
Yeah,
of his
like
way, but it was hilarious. But I remember going in there and being that amped up, right,
yeah,
to
right.
make a difference and make a mark, and so it was great. Now I got cut early. I made it through the
Mhm.
season, and I got cut and got put on practice squad.
Mhm.
And then they had a lot of injuries, but unfortunately none of them were offensive linemen. So I never got bumped up. And so they cut a lot of the practice squad. And so I had been cut twice in the first part of the season for just
Mhm.
short little brief periods of time, week here, week there. And so my agent, who was Ken Staninger at the time, great agent, miss him a lot.
Mhm.
He said, "Hey, the Rams want you. They've kind of always been talking about you. There may be an opportunity for the Rams." So partway through that season is when I transitioned to a tryout with the Rams, won the tryout, and then season was going. Everything was in Seattle. Thought that's where I was always going to be. And within my first, quarter of the year, I was already gone to another team.
I feel like your mentality has always been like the next day of work. Like everything that we've talked about here today and everything that I've known about you, I think you just continued to just take it one like step at a time. What did like professional football, did it teach you anything more about preparation and how life was going to be?
Oh, I think for sure. It's my parents taught me great work ethic. I was thankful for that. I think for me, it was always, I don't think I ever held myself to high enough standards as I should have, right? I kind of doubted myself a little bit. Sometimes I needed to look at the big picture and see how set goals down the road. Like you said, and I still tend to be this way, but I set a lot of short-term goals, but sometimes you need to set that big goal and that
Mm-hmm.
that big picture kind of goal. And so I think part of that was learning how to do the day-to-day preparation, but having super high expectations for yourself individually, not just as a team, not just as a group,
Mm-hmm.
and then realizing the effect that you can have on somebody without being the top dog, so to speak, right? And so
Yeah.
realizing that I had a part to play without having to been a starter, right? I
Mhm.
could make a team better through my role in a practice squad or
Right.
in preseason games, right? And so I think part of that changed my mentality a little bit. I think the neat thing that I learned out of the NFL and that I've carried over to my career in physical therapy and outpatient kind of orthopedics is you start to really, really appreciate at a high level of football. Not that you didn't have it at Montana, but when it's an organization and your sole purpose and all the money and all the effort goes into just winning games, period, right? There's no
Mhm.
school anymore. There's no camaraderie like there used to be. There's some, but
Yes.
guys got families. They're all different. They all come from different places and schools. And so that was a hard shock for me to not
Right.
have that kind of tightness on a team because that's all I'd ever known as a Grizz and at Hellgate was tight teams and guys that believed in each other. And to see that dissipate a little bit was different. But I think that the big organization to see that everybody plays a role and everybody has something to do with making us better. And it's not
Right.
always the people you think, right? And everybody knows that you got to have good players and good coaches, but the people that told me about nutrition, the people that told me about taking care of my body a little bit better, sleeping better, um, not having quite as many beers, all these different things that you just
Yeah.
kind of you realize like my body is my career right now, right? And then
Right.
all the little aspects that went into that, I think was helpful. And then to see all the people that contribute to the scene, and maybe part of that was just getting older and maturing a little bit, and realizing like that's what it takes to be great. And I tell this to my staff still to this day. It's okay to be better than somebody, but that's never my goal now. I used to think of myself as like I want to be better than that guy. I want to be better than this guy. I want to be better than this team. And you can be better than somebody, but that doesn't mean you're great, right? Like the goal should be to be great, and great's going to look different in different times of your career and different settings and times. But I think that really taught me like, hey, there's greatness that's built up in moments, and it's not about being better,
Right.
because anybody can be better than somebody. That's not special, but being great at what you do is what's special. And I think that's something that I really took out of the NFL.
So the NFL comes to an end. I mean, there's obviously a question that comes in everyone's life like, okay, when is this going to end and what am I going to do? And it
Mhm.
brought you back to Missoula for physical therapy school. I know you were always a student first, even before athlete. School has always been important to you. Were you always interested in physical therapy? And is that what you wanted to do? You knew that, hey, you know what? If this football dream is cut short or I fulfill it and I'm ready to
Yeah.
move on, I'm coming back to Missoula to get my physical therapy degree.
Yeah, it was. I thought it was always what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And I had done some shadowing hours at Tim Cordial Physical Therapy in town, and
Okay.
and I and I thought that that's what I would want to do. And I always thought I would want to do it with athletes. I saw Blaine McElmurray when we were freshmen. I saw Blaine McElmurray tear his ACL, unfortunately, and he rehabbed. And I remember watching him go through the rehab process, and he came back, I think, at 8 months, which back then was phenomenal. Like it
Right.
was back then when you talk about ACLs, you're like, man, is this guy ever going to come back to what he was? It's probably going to be at
Right.
least a year if he does. He's probably going to lose a step, but he can still play. And Blaine killed rehab. He had a great surgeon. He had a great PT. And I remember thinking at that point, that's what I'm going to be. Is I'm going to be a sports physical therapist for athletes only. Then as I got into my NFL career, went through college, went my NFL career, I was still kind of on that track. I'd gotten into PT school, but turned it down to see if I
Mhm.
could make it in the NFL, of course. But I'd always come back to the university and stayed in touch with them. Every time I came to Missoula, I would go by the school
Mhm.
and say, hey, this could end for me tomorrow, and eventually I want to come back here, but I'm just kind of trying to ride out this pretty good thing I got going right now. And
Yes.
and they said that's great. You just contact us when you want to and let us know. And so when I got cut from Jacksonville, I had met my wife. I knew that's who I wanted to marry. She was still finishing college at the time. And so I went back and did a year at Montana and thought I would have to reapply. And they basically said, like, hey, we had a guy drop out. You've always come in and checked with us. We can get you in 2 weeks. So the school had already started 2 weeks. Now it's a little scary when you haven't done any anatomy or anything like that in 4 years, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden you're the non-traditional at only 27 years old. But I went back to school and had to do a lot of catch up, because I hadn't really thought about
Yeah.
that. I've been so focused on sports, hadn't really thought about that in years, and went back to school, loved it, and started growing my passion. Then quickly realized during clinical internships and things you do, I wanted to work with athletes, but I really enjoyed working with all sorts of people, all sorts of issues, and getting people back to life and just serving others was kind of what it was about. And yes, I still want to be with athletes, but it didn't have to be all athletes. It didn't have to be with a sports team. And that's kind of always stuck with me. And that's kind of the setting I'm in now.
Okay, so actually talk about bringing Allison to Montana. I mean, she was still finishing school, but how did
Mhm.
she handle the winters?
So
Montana.
Montana people are great. We had a great group of friends and family. And so, but you take a Florida girl to Montana, that's not, yeah, you got to be a real sweetheart, because that's a tough thing to do. So she dove into Missoula really well. I had some money left over from football, but I bought a ring, bought a car, was trying to save some things and had to pay for PT school. So we kind of lived meager, and we got a cheap little apartment. And those
Mhm.
are still some of the best years. Most people tell you some of those meager years with,
Simple, right?
it's just
It's a
life is
simpler
simple.
life. Yes.
You're just giddy, you're married, you're so happy. And so she dove in, and she actually worked at the university in a catering job and did some other things in town. And I just dove into school. And the first year we were apart, and she traveled up to see me. In the second
Mhm.
year, we lived there, and we'd go down to the Iron Horse, and she'd hang out and get to meet all the buddies. She'd hear all the old football stories, probably way more than she ever wanted to hear. Dove into the University of Montana culture, realized really quickly what a special place Missoula was. But in her mind, it was always it was tough. She taught rhythmic gymnastics at the time, and she knew that that setting in Montana wasn't great for that.
Right.
And I didn't want to squash her passion for what she did, being a former rhythmic gymnast. And so she did. We knew that we were probably going to have to eventually go somewhere where we could both do what we loved.
Right. So she was a cheerleader for
She was.
the Jaguars. So, okay,
Yeah.
so how did that work? You could have gotten into some like trouble
Yeah.
there, right?
We,
I mean, you
we
might have had to
illegally
date on the
dated.
down low.
We met each other. We met each other several times. Have you met Allison? No, I don't think so. Hey, how you doing?
Oh,
And here we were dating.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
but it was funny one time. Actually, this is kind of a funny story. But the Jaguars coach called, and while my wife was in school, she taught dance, and she was on the Jaguars and did those things. And the coach called and says, "I know about you and Allison." And I said, "I have no Allison. Who are you talking about?" She's like, "I know. I've literally seen you guys out. I know you're dating Allison. I'm telling you, it's cool. Like, I like you. I approve of this. It's okay." And I was like, "I'm sorry. I don't know who you're talking about, and I don't really need your approval, but thank you." And I just blew it off. And she was so mad at me on the phone. She's
Oh my
like,
gosh.
"Fine." She goes, "You guys can date. Just know it's okay with it. She's not going to get in trouble." She slams the phone down. And so we had a good laugh about that, but we had to play it careful because I didn't want her to get in trouble. I certainly want to get in trouble for that. But just met my wife, and she was fantastic and always supported me and talked about how great it was that I played pro ball. And then I saw video of her being a rhythmic gymnast, and she was exceptionally high caliber.
It's
Was
amazing,
ranked
actually.
nationally in the ball event. So rhythmic gymnastics is the ball, hoop, ribbon,
Mhm.
all those things. And she was ranked nationally, and then was actually on the national, what they call it, the junior Olympic team, and had a chance to go to the Olympics and with the team rhythmic gymnastics. And so she was phenomenal, way better athlete than I ever was, and got to take her sports to a high level as well. So it was always fun. I always wish I could have known her back in those years because she got to do some pretty special stuff herself.
So you're telling me that maybe your kid's athletic ability might have come from Allison. Some of it.
Maybe more from Allison.
I love it.
They got, my boys got some good sized thighs on them because of me, but other than that, yeah, I think a lot of their athletic ability came from mom, honestly.
Dave, you've turned this profession, you've now moved into the professional side of your life. And I have to ask, why Tennessee? Like, did you just pick a place? Or I assume Allison was like, I don't think about Missoula. I'm not quite sure. Obviously, she couldn't do what she wanted there, but why
Yeah.
Tennessee?
So the funny thing is the only team that beat us the last year I was with the Jaguars was my last year. The only team that beat us was the Titans, and they beat us 3 times. And so the last place I wanted to be was anything around the Titans because that was still a sore subject. But Blaine McElmurray is one of my best friends. Had actually played for the Titans, and when Allison and I realized there was going to be some opportunities, we kind of looked at lots of different places. She potentially still wanted to cheer, and I always asked her, I was like, she did this high level of rhythmic gymnastics, but why cheerleading? And she's like, it is so fun to be on a place that it's not just palm cheerleading. It's like true dancers, and she is an exceptional true dancer. She still coaches dance to this day, and she goes to go somewhere where they recognize that. And where in the dance world do you get to dance in front of 80,000 plus people, right?
Mhm.
And to be part of it. And she loves sports, and she always knew her football, which I always loved, right? I could talk football with my girlfriend and my wife. But so Blaine McElmurray played here, and he was like, you know what? He goes, we're going to stay in Montana. He goes, but what's really cool is Middle Tennessee. And my wife was like, I have family that lives there. And she's like, and they have the Titans, so maybe she could cheer, do dance down here. She didn't know. And I started looking into jobs down here, and we talked to her family. And so I came down and I did, I think 3 or 4 job interviews in one day, and
Mhm.
just ran from place to place and just looked at different physical therapy companies. And then she looked into opportunities to coach and teach dance or rhythmic gymnastics. And we said we didn't have kids at the time. We said, gosh, let's take a gamble.
Okay.
Let's go to Nashville. Nashville's fun, and we're super glad we have. This is 24 years ago now, which is hard to believe. But you have the city, you have music, you have all the hype of Nashville, which has definitely escalated and grown over the years
Mhm.
to one of the most popular cities in the country now, for sure, destination cities. but they had country still. It has lakes, it has quiet hikes, it has outdoors, waterfalls, tons of sports, tons of music, all these things.
Mhm.
And nothing compares to Missoula, but I wanted to move somewhere where, you had lunch in the parks and you had all
Right.
these concerts and you had athletics in a university. And so to me, it was like a big version of nothing compares to Missoula. Of course, it never will, but a big version of a place that I loved, that I could still have all those aspects be part of my
Yes.
life and still have a career in a great place for both my wife and I. So we took a gamble and it stuck and we love it. It's been our home for a long time now.
So two kids, and your son is currently playing at Carson Newman, which is kind of an interesting story because that is you got your second career start
Mhm.
against Carson Newman.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
full circle. Did you make that connection when he was looking to
Oh
attend
yeah.
this
I
small
remember.
school that's very academically high level as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah. Yep. And super proud of Colin that he's getting an opportunity. And of course, you always want it to be their passion, and luckily it
Right?
turned out for him. And it's not my passion. He loves football, um, and so he was like me. He's following in my footsteps. He was like an all region player down here at the highest level of ball, 6A. Very little aspects. He's a little shorter than I am. Was a little bit
Hmm.
undersized. Here goes this story again. But a hard worker, passionate about the game, wanted to go someplace that was special, and started getting recruited by Carson Newman. We went on one trip, and it's a neat place because we're Christians. It's a Christian school, with a rich football tradition, but not so many great years of football recently. And so they got a new coach that came in from Navy. They were recruiting us, and you go to their press box, and instead of all their trophies and all these things they've won over the years, it's literally pictures of kids getting baptized on the walls, football players getting baptized. And I'm like looking around the room, and the recruiter guy's like, "You've noticed we're a little different in kind of what we care about." And my wife is like, "He's going here. They care about his soul." And I'm like, "Easy, honey. Like, we got to
Oh,
play this cool." But we loved it. It's been a great fit for us, with
okay.
our faith. It's been a great fit for my son as far as academically. It's a very challenging school, but a small school, and he digs that. He actually, they Knoxville is about half I guess 30 minutes away, so he can drive into Knoxville if he wants some excitement, but he can
Mhm.
focus on studies and football where he is, and he digs that. It's just been a great home for him, and hopefully he's going into his redshirt sophomore year. He's about 6'2", 270 now, so put on some size, just like his daddy is. Took a little longer than you wanted, but very very proud of him, and I know that he's going to do great things whether it's on the football field or not. So.
Your daughter Finley is following in your wife's footsteps. Like,
Mhm.
what drew her to dance? Can you give our listeners just an update about Finley?
Yeah. Finley is different. So Colin, like a lot of people's kids, they're really different. Colin is a little bit of an overthinker
Hmm.
and a planner and those type of things. And Finley has always just known that she is great and she's
Hmm.
humble, but she's always believed in herself, in what she's done. I mean, we would watch. She had always liked to sing. She's always liked to dance. She's always liked to kind of perform in one way or another. And we would watch, dance shows, or we would watch, So You Think You Could Dance, or
Hmm.
some of the music shows like The Voice, and she would watch someone sing and then go in the other room and you'd hear her singing that song, and she would come out as a really young child, come out and say, "I can sing it better than she can," and she would just start belting out a song or showing you dance moves. And so she has always just been drawn to dance. She did some volleyball and some other things when she was younger, but dance has always been where it's at for her. And we tried to get her to push her to other things, and just give her a more experience and a wider breadth of sports and music and everything. And she played the flute, and boy, as soon as she could quit the flute, as soon as we let her, she quit the flute. And it's just always been dance. And so she's the kid now that, she's going into her sophomore year. It's just like a lot of sports. You're trying to
Hmm.
get attention from colleges. You've got big schools you want to go to. You've got big dreams. We try to help her, get there as much as we can from our aspect. She knows it's on her shoulders to do it. Um, but she's the kid who will go and practice for 6 hours, then come home and go upstairs and work on it for another 2 hours. We're like, you have to eat dinner, you
Yeah.
have to stop, you have to sleep, you know. And so she's just really, a highly motivated, driven kid. Colin was my student that loves school. Finley is my one who, she does great in school, but she's not my school kid. So she's got her dreams on potentially coaching and being in the dance world like her mom after she gets done with her career.
So, Dave, you've stayed on well, you are the Director of Rehabilitation Services at Bone and Joint Institute, but how many years have you been with them? And this clinic has grown immensely under your watch. Can you let us know what's going on in your world of physical
Yeah,
therapy
yeah.
and at this facility?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So I was with another company for 17 years. Great company. A lot of them are still friends and family. but had gotten to a role where I just felt like I had bigger aspirations, and I thought that we could do more. And so I've always worked with the group of physicians that I work with now, had known them my whole career, and really, it's a very, very unusual orthopedic group. Humble and orthopedic surgeon doesn't always go together, but this is a very humble group, very skilled. They've gone from regionally known, locally and regionally known doctors to now internationally known doctors.
Mhm.
And so, anyways, I was with this other company, wanted to do something different. They left. They were under with Vanderbilt. They left Vanderbilt to partner with a local regional hospital nonprofit that was called Williamson Health. And so they asked me to come over and start rehab for them. So was blessed to get that position. And the neat thing was is they never had their own rehab. So this was absolutely a labor of love. But how many times in your career do you get to build something from the ground up and do
So
it with people
exciting.
that are hardworking, humble, brilliant, and realize that surgical outcomes are only enhanced by doing the right things through physical therapy and occupational therapy. So started with one clinic. Over the last 7 years, we have grown to 6. Lots of opportunity for growth, and just get to do it with a lot of people who are like-minded. So it's coming full circle again. People who believe in the mission, people who are humble, people who are willing to roll their sleeves up and go to work. They want to serve, and so very thankful to continue to do the job that I'm passionate about with people who view things the same way I do as far as patient care, and appropriate growth and doing things the right way.
I love it, Dave. I could keep going with you, but I'm looking at the clock now and I'm thinking, okay, I've kept you a little bit longer. And I always like to end with every one of my guests. I give the same question, like what does being Montana made mean to you?
Gosh, it's a great question. I think the number one thing that comes to mind is community. I think there's, and like I said, lots of people probably say that, but there's a certain level of toughness
Hmm.
that just Montana people have, and there's lots of ways that can, lots of places that can come from. But I think there's just a level of expectations and grit, if you want to call it that, that Montana people have. And so when we, in general, I think that when you say Montana made, I think you get people who understand, that follow their passions, that understand that it takes a community to do that, that aren't going to be told no, um,
Hmm.
and want to follow through with doing things the right way. I think that aspect comes through in community. It comes through in individuals. And I think that's what really makes Montana special. And anybody who's been there, I mean, I see people all the time and they ask where I'm from. They're like, I've always wanted to go. I've heard the most wonderful things about Montana and Missoula.
Hmm.
I send people to my brother's campground up in Glacier all the time, and they just sit around a campfire and they're just like, this place is special. And I've always heard that, but everybody says that. But then you get to Montana and you realize just how Montana looks at the world and how we look at our little corner of the world. And I think it's just people who are very appreciative to have what we have, and we don't need much sometimes, right?
Right.
It's the important things. I think we have a little bit more. This is a run-on answer, isn't it? But we have a little more perspective, I think, on what's important, and we have a little toughness to get us to make sure we can maintain that lifestyle.
Well, Dave, you exemplify what Montana Made is, and it's seriously been such an honor today to have you on the show and to be able to just go through your whole life. And it has been fascinating, and I'm so thankful. So, thank you for joining me today.
Wow, thank you. It's good to see you again as always. Congrats on your career and all the great things you did, and it was fun. That like you said, that was always a family, the Lady Grizz. I mean, you know this, but we all hung out and cheered each other on, and so to see you doing what you're doing now and bringing these stories out in people, I'm just thankful to be a part of it. So appreciate you.
Thank you, Dave. A special thank you to Dave Kempfert for sharing his story, and thanks to all of you for listening to Montana Made. I'd also like to thank our presenting sponsor, Clearwater Credit Union. One of Clearwater Credit Union's core beliefs is igniting human potential, and I can honestly say they've done that for me. When I shared my vision for Montana Made, they believed in it from the very beginning. Their support has helped bring these conversations to life and given me the opportunity to share the stories of remarkable Montanans with all of you. That's what investing in people looks like. To learn more about Clearwater Credit Union services and to read more inspiring stories about how they're helping ignite human potential across Montana, visit clearwatercreditunion.org. Coming up in 2 weeks, I'll sit down with Rebecca Swandle, a fourth-generation Montanan from Shields Valley. Rebecca recently became the newest judge on Montana's 6th Judicial District Court, bringing a lifetime of Montana values to the bench. Until next time, I'm Krista Redpath. Thanks for listening to Montana Made, a featured series of the Krista Redpath podcast.